Hello there, I'm Grandmaster Max Illingworth, and in this video I'm going to do the first part of what may well become a longer series on how to play Fog of War chess successfully. You see, at the time I'm recording this, at least to my knowledge, I'm the highest rated player in Fog of War chess on chess.com, with a rating in the high 1900s, and since there isn't really any established theory on this variant, compared let's say to similar ones such as Kriegspiel, at least that I know of, well, this can be a nice chance to share, my knowledge and understanding of this variant, and it can hopefully help others to play it better as well by sharing my ideas. So what I'll do is I'll just start by showing my oldest games I played, the first Fog of War games I played. Now I think at the time I record this I've played about 137 games, so of course I have a much better idea of how to play the variant, but these were the games where I was still kind of figuring it out and where not many people had yet to start playing this variant. And Fog of War is the most popular variant, it seems, on chess.com of the new ones released. So, anyway, I'll show you the game. A few points about the rules of Fog of War chess. Basically, the way it works is that you can see the squares covered by your pieces. So, for example, if we take White's first move, this is what Black can see in the Fog of War chess. You can only see your first four ranks. And actually, if, say, White has a pawn on d5 in this position, then I won't be able to see it directly, but I will be able to see that I can't push my pawn to d5. So I'll note they have some piece there, though I may not know whether it's a pawn. It might be a knight, hypothetically, for example. So that's kind of the basics of how it works. Also, another key point, and this is one I actually didn't understand when I played this game, is actually in... one point is also the aim of this game is not actually to checkmate the king as is the case in Kriegspiel, but actually the aim is to capture the king, which means that quite significantly that if you play a move that puts your king in check or leaves your king in check, then the opponent can simply take your king and win the game. Likewise, it's also possible to play a move that normally in normal chess would be illegal, but in this game there's sort of no such thing really as an illegal move with the king in that sense when it comes to check. So that's something important to keep in mind, and basically the reason I lost this game was because I thought that it was the same as Kriegspiel and that it wouldn't let me play an illegal move that would put my king in check, and so it kind of shocked with what happened. So okay, my opponent played the move d4. You can see it on the board, and I could show it so you can see both sides, but I think it'll be more instructive to see it where I don't see the opponent's pieces to show the strategy in a more, objective way based on what happened in the actual game. I do know that you can see the moves here as well in case you need a reference point, but now I'll focus more on the position and then the moves per se, unless something happens later in the game I should have anticipated. So I played the move e6, e4, I could have played bishop b4 check if I wanted to, because he actually played e5 as his next move. So, on the other hand, though, I didn't know that he played d4. He could have played some move like c3 to stop it. So, with bishop b4, it is kind of rolling the dice. In the end, I played queen f6, which... Because what I understood is, for logically speaking, is that, in this variant, the more squares your piece can see, the more you'll know about your opponent's intentions, and the better you'll be able to predict what they may do. But the problem with queen f6 is that my queen could also potentially get attacked by a knight, and I wouldn't know whether the queen was under attack or not, unless of course I covered all the squares with which I could attack my queen with a knight. So after e5, I played queen to g6. I was just kind of hoping he would play bishop d3 and let me get the pawn on g2. The problem is that he could potentially put a knight on h4, and I'll have to constantly be mindful of this. Like, if I had this position now, I'd probably go bishop e7 to anticipate knight h4. So I played knight h6, and you also didn't know that my queen was on g6 either. So after bishop e2, I played d6. And it's sort of an important point that you want to make sure this diagonal here from a4 to e8 is blocked before pushing the d-pawn, because there'll be some tricky players who'll put a bishop or queen here in the hope of taking your queen early. So e takes d6 was played. I took back with the bishop. And of course, I had no way of knowing that the g2 pawn was undefended. But even if it was, he'd still play rook g1 and he would get a very strong initiative anyway. So it still wouldn't be a good move in this variant to give White the mobility like this. So after castles, I played knight f6. And already in this position actually is kind of funny. In normal chess, white would have the move of knight h4, and he would actually be, well, almost trapping my queen, except I have queen to e4 as such. But yeah, knight h4 would have been a very unpleasant move if he knew my my queen was on g6. I mean, he could also play bishop d3. It's one way to improve the mobility of the bishop. Anyway, after rook e1 and a6, he kind of surprised me a bit. Because, I mean, I played a6 thinking, well, maybe he has a bishop on b5 or a knight on b5. So let's just make sure he can't put a piece to attack my bishop or knight. But then he played bishop a6, which kind of surprised me. And, well, after rook a6, I mean, I played d5. And, at the time, I didn't really realize that, if he has rook e1, I wouldn't be able to legally play ed5. Because if my king was castled already, the general principle would be that in these sort of positions, you would want to take with the lesser value piece. Because it means, let's say, for example, if... I mean, of course, we know a pawn is on c4, but say, hypothetically, if their pawn is on c4, you would much rather take with the pawn and with the knight, so that when they take back, you're only, traded a pawn rather than losing a piece as such. It's a principle that's known from standard chess, but still good to mention. Anyway, after knight d5, he could have played queen d5, but that relies on knowing that I haven't castled my king. And now after bishop g5, I think the next move I played was a mistake, where... I mean, I should simply castle my king because I kind of know because he played e5 and d5 that the center is open and that therefore my king is not safe in the center and I should get out as soon as possible. I mean, at this time, I think I was so focused on attacking his piece, I didn't really think about my own king safety. Now, after h6, well, he played queen d5 and this is the reason I lost this game because I thought that, well, he probably has a rook on e1, but he won't let me take on... If I try play e5, I can test if I can safely play the move, because I thought it was Kriegspiel and it would be... Those concerned wouldn't let me play e5 if he had a rook on e1. Otherwise, I would have absolutely castled and, with the double attack on the queen and the bishop, well, I would be able to still be up a piece and have a technically winning position with best play. Also, because if you look at this position and compare the white pieces with the black pieces, then it's clear after 8 castles or even hg5 here that the black pieces have considerably more mobility. My queen and rooks are active, the bishop's active. I mean, in this case, white would have lost both the bishops as well, because the bishops are very important pieces in this variant for having the long-range scope. Because also, I mean, I can really see which way your bishop is pointing, is, other than, say, putting a rook on the d-file, would be, say, to put the queen there, if not a bishop, but then I could simply take the queen. So the thing, the bishops are very hard pieces to oppose in general, but yeah, in the game I didn't understand the rules, and the result was that I simply lost the game because he could take my king on this move. The good news is that, well, I learned my lesson, and it meant that, well, I could know the rules correctly for the next games and not repeat this egregious mistake. So to show you the next game, I'll just scroll through. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to download the games directly with Fog of War. I think it's sort of like 4-player chess. I'm also in the top 20 in the world fairly consistently in this variant. Though I haven't yet cracked the 2600 bar at the time I record this. So anyway, I'll show you my next game that I played where I was a bit more successful. This one I also had the black pieces, as you can see. It's one thing curious I found about this this variant, that with the color distribution, you often end up playing the same color several times in a row, even if you're playing the same opponent. So anyway, I had a chance to test my black openings once again. And this time I played the move d5, which nowadays I wouldn't play d5 much as my first move, unless I, say, was fairly sure what my opponent would play. Because the disadvantage is if he had played e4, d5, he'd be able to either play ed5 and my queen would get chased around early, or he'd be able to play a bishop b5 check that would mean I'd basically have to block with c6 or knight c6 on the next move anyway. So it'd kind of be, a little bit of a bluff in that sense. Anyway, after d4, I played knight c6, in case he played bishop b5, threatening to take my king. You can sort of start to see already that this variant is virtually all about prophylaxis. Really, that's the key to, well, making sure that you win, is to make sure a position is safe, that they can't generate any threats because we covered all the bases. And then from there, letting them sort of eventually put a piece on pre. Or if they do keep playing passively, to just steadily improve the position and outplay them as if it was normal chess almost. So after h3, I mean, I sort of knew this was his move because of the bishop here. And okay, I sort of figured, well, it's very unlikely he will have played e3 and bishop d3 as his other two moves, since we're at move 4 at this point. So I knew that bishop f5 would almost certainly be a safe move. I continued to play quite wasteful moves, and well, I just continued developing the pieces. Bishop d6. And bishop d6 is better than bishop e7 because it gives my bishop more mobility along both open diagonals. And it was quite justified in the game because after bishop f4, well, I could play bishop takes f4. One interesting thing that comes up actually in this variant of Fog of War is the point that should you capture first, or should you let your opponent capture first? Because often in normal chess, it's better to let the opponent capture first, but the disadvantage in doing so, you give the opponent more information where, like, let's say if I castle, for instance, I'm curious what happens if I actually play a move like this. Okay, so it lets me play variations, which is nice. After bishop d6, they could see that rook is on f8 and my pawn is on c7, so they would almost certainly know that I castled in that case. So it would give my opponent unnecessary information to castle, because most players are going to take at the first opportunity. Therefore, I played bishop f4, and that gave me the vision to see, well, that he doesn't have a queen on d2, so therefore his queen is almost certainly on d1 in this position. After g takes f4, I played knight e4. Nowadays, I wouldn't play the move knight to e4. I think I would play a move like h6 or maybe just castles. If I want to keep him guessing about which side my king was castling, I'd maybe go queen e7 for maximum mobility. Because after all, I know that his dark squared bishop is traded. So that means I know that he's not going to have bishop to a3. And we also can see, if we go back, that all of these squares around here are covered by my pieces. So the queen would be very safe on e7. So instead I played knight e4. This time I was still playing it a bit more dynamically, you could say. So I'll just remove these here. Okay, so after knight e4, I was kind of relying on playing knight e4, and then I was going to play d4, based on the fact that he wouldn't know that I took with a pawn, so therefore I would be able to potentially win a piece. A big part of this is also about not just stopping the opponent's attacks, but also finding attacks that the opponent doesn't know that you have, to sort of, again, keep them guessing and to, create threats that they are not really able to easily stop, except by good fortune. So after bishop g2, here I had a bit of a slip in concentration, actually, where I should have realized that he would almost certainly have put the knight on f3, but I kind of got a bit overexcited and blundered with queen h4. Now I think the approach I would play is, probably I would play knight takes c3, because it just allows me to see his queen on d1, his pawn on a4. So in seeing the pawn on a4, I could even then say, well, okay, that means knight a5 will almost certainly be a safe move. I can put the knight on c4 to have even more information, to have my knight on a square where, for example, he might then put the queen on d2 or something and just let me take it for free, because that's the most obvious square for the queen at the moment. This sort of plan like this would be very unpleasant for white. But yeah, I blundered the queen and was sort of very lucky to win from here. Because, at this point, it's almost kind of like, if I'd lost 2 games there, I would have thought, okay, I just have no talent for this variant. But luckily, I was able to swindle my opponent just with very stout defense. It was sort of this game that made me realize that in a lot of positions, rather than trying to attack the opponent, it's sort of actually better just to stop all their ideas and let them try to attack you, but make sure that you're very well defended, so that when they do attack, they'll almost certainly either put a piece on pre, or even if they do make the attack work, that you could still put up a good defense. So after knight g2, I long castled. One thing I think that's important, especially if you're playing the same opponent several times, is to try and keep your opponent guessing, make it as hard as possible to figure out what way you played it. So in some games castle short, in some games castle long, and maybe even the occasional game keep the king in the center a bit longer. I like to keep my king in the center a little bit longer than usual if I know the center is not open, because that way it sort of means that they can't easily attack on the flank. If they attack on the flank, it just won't really do anything. So it kind of makes it a bit unpleasant for them to keep them guessing. It also means you have more information as to what their plan is for which way your king will be safer. So after knight e3, I played h6, and I kind of realized my best chance here was just to try to cover as many squares as possible and hope that he would blunder a piece somewhere. So I played c5, went g5, because I want to open up the h file for my rook, was my thinking. Because I realized that since he has doubled f pawns, that it means after takes, my rook has a lot more vision than his. And also another point is that when they know you've taken a piece, what a lot of players will do is they will start to attack that square because they kind of know you have a piece there, so it's almost like a weakness they can target. So also a good principle, which can often really cause problems for relatively low-rated players, is to simply let them sort of defend that piece. Or if you can't really defend it, say if it's a queen, for example, and you're worried about a knight attacking it, then you could just move that piece away to another square as well. So I played h6, figuring, well, if he were to take, then it means I'm going to win material. So again, giving him more chance to go wrong. And we'll see that kind of paid off in the game, because he played h4, I think, not realizing that my rook is on h8. Maybe he thought my king is on g8, because most of the time in normal chess, black and white will castle short. So it's again doing the opposite of what the opponent thinks you will do without compromising your position. It's also a funny point that I could have actually taken on d4. But the reason I didn't is because I thought he probably had a pawn on c3. Although actually, knowing that he played knight c3, I could have actually figured out that he didn't have a pawn on c3. But at the same time, I didn't know that he had a knight on e3, not a pawn on e3. Because, I mean, it's something I only realized when I played about 100 games that, you can actually tell by this square being covered whether you can push your pawn or not. Where if it's sort of a, unhighlighted square, it means that e3 is a legal move. And if it's not highlighted, if it is highlighted, it means that there's something blockading the pawn, which is very useful information and shows why it's good to get those pawns and to grab space. It's even more than just the space, but it's also the fact that you know if they have something blocking or not, which is useful. And also if they unblock, that also tells you, well, that means a piece moved from that square. So I played g takes h4. Again, following the principle that, well, I don't know if he has a rook on h1 or not, so if he does, it's going to be better to take a lesser value piece, so that if he captures, I will, well, be able to take back and win a rook rather than win a pawn. It also means I have a passed pawn, which could cause him a lot of problems in the future. Where after king to rook h1, h3, well, then we had rook takes and rook takes here. And yeah, he realized, well, of course, rook h3 was a blunder. He should play c3 and make sure everything is well protected, like queen c2, maybe long castles would be the correct approach to get his extra pieces developed and use his extra queen. But yeah, after this in king d2, well, I mean, of course, the move knight d4 would have been quite appealing, or actually e5 would be even better, because after e5, it's quite possible he would consider taking and just let me win with rook d2, but even if he doesn't, I still can play ed4 next move and basically, well, ensure that I can grab some more material and get some initiative. But for some reason I had a hallucination and thought that the e-pawn had already been traded, which, if I'd used a little bit of deductive reasoning, I would have realized this was not the case. But yeah, I was playing a little bit too quickly in this game, and results, I ended up losing this rook, and yeah, after c4, then I realized I should really play e5. I mean, after d5, I kind of knew that, well, okay, I didn't know for sure, but I kind of guessed that, okay, maybe he has pushed his pawns already. So I kind of bluffed with knight d4. Because I thought his pawn is on c2, and that, if it is, then the knight will give me that information. And I'm kind of losing anyway, so I should sort of play more active moves to compensate. Luckily for me, he made a big blunder with queen b3, because, I mean, if he had played some move like, let's say, queen b1, to make sure that the king is covered from checks from both b3 and e4 from the knight, so that I could only really check him with a rook realistically, well, then he probably would win the game, because then he could also build up maybe an attack on the b file, hitting the weakness on b7. But instead he played queen b3, which of course blundered, and, well, I was very excited because I realized he didn't have a way of seeing that the king was under attack by the knight. And of course it's very easy to figure out, because the only other way you could take is if, I'd had, say, a rook on b7, but because he would have seen that the pawn was on b7 from before, then he would have realized, well, it has to be a knight, and therefore a king must be in check. But he didn't make that deductive reasoning, and therefore after rook b1, he lost the king. And I was able to swindle my opponent in this way, which was a lot of fun. So okay, we've looked at 2 games, and why not look at a few more to see how it plays out. So, okay, I'll show one more of these really old games I played, then I might actually show a more recent one after that, so you can see the difference between my earliest games and my most recent one. I end up playing this Spy Ninjas guy again, and one tip also when you're making a rematch, one thing that can work really well, is to click the rematch button before the opponent, and then as quickly as possible scroll up to the start of the game, and at least quickly see their opening moves, because by doing that it means it's very likely that you'll see kind of roughly what opening they play, but on the other hand, they won't, well, it means that they won't be sort of see your opening, so it'll kind of give you advantage information. Of course, if they rematch first, the thing is to, like, as soon as the game finishes, check the notation, see what opening they play, so if they give you a rematch, you know the opening and they don't know your opening is the idea. Where if you do it quickly enough, you'll almost always know it better than your opponent, especially if you're a speed reader like me. So anyway, this game was another one where it seems like in my first games I was just blundering my queen in every game, which was sort of a bit careless. After e4, knight f6, yeah, he played the move d3. Knight f6 is a move that I usually play, just because it kind of is a most flexible move in a certain sense. Because very few opponents are going to play e5 unless they're like really short at you. Are going to play knight f6. But if you're playing the same opponent several times, you can also mix up the move order so that they don't really know whether you've played knight f6 early or not. You could play knight c6 early, for example, and then e5 would just lose the pawn, and you would know for sure then that e5 was played because it's only move 2 as such. So it's a forced position. You can sort of bluff them in this kind of way. And it's why I see some of the other top some of the top Fog of War players play. So after d3, I played knight c6 and covered this square. Later, I refined myself and played the move c5 on move 2, which I think is more flexible, because it gives you a bit more space to work with. So if they go d4 or b4, you can simply take it. But I played knight c6 and kind of played it like a sort of delayed Scandinavian with d5. And also at points if he takes, you can kind of take with the knight, and they sort of can't easily see that your knight's seeing that square. Nowadays I tend not to play this opening so much, because you would almost certainly have to retreat the knight. In case they play c4 and say, well, okay, I'm going to threaten to take your knight for free, and then you kind of have to retreat anyway as such, just to, guard against this. So anyway, he played queen e2, and I think what happened was I was so sure that he had a queen on d1, because it sort of was the case in the other games my opponents had played. But I kind of just played queen d1 like almost as a semi-pre-move of sorts. So then I played, it's like, oh wait, he doesn't have a queen on d1, and it was, very embarrassing. So anyway, I did see that he had a queen and king, and the only good thing about blundering the queen like an idiot in this way is that I did at least see the place papers of many of my opponent's pieces. So basically I could figure that he would almost certainly have played with queen takes, and I could at least go knight takes, and here I just very much went into swindle mode and realized I should play more aggressively to use the fact that I am down a queen and I have to rely on information as such. So after knight fd2, again you can see he's following the pattern that when the king is under attack, when I've taken a piece somewhere that he can't take back immediately, people tend to play a move that will attack that piece. Though admittedly knight c3 was a much better way to do it, or even queen e2, since he could have figured that it was probably a knight that was taking, because the only other way I could have got there is if I'd had a bishop go on b7 to e4, but with black having played d5, it's not really very likely. So anyway, he played knight fd2, and now knight f2, I think, based on knowing what I know, I basically knew more or less that where all of my opponent's pieces were at this point after knight fd2, or at least I should have known in the game I was still reeling from blundering a queen. So I knew that knight f2 would be a good gamble, because it would make his king very exposed. And even though I'd lose a piece, I would get the opportunity to play a bishop c5 check, and from there kind of sort of gain some time on his king. Now, probably a very shrewd player would play knight b3 here, but he also might think, well, maybe I have bishop c5 already, so I should move the king. So king e2 is a good idea in principle, but he should have played king e1 instead, I think. And then maybe played g3 next move in case I played some bishop to h4 check at some point. In any case, we had bishop c5. Bishop g4 would have been very clever in hindsight, but there was no way of me really knowing his king was on e2. And then he was sort of trying to bluff me a bit and say, okay, you're never going to guess that my king will be on e2. But on the other hand, he also shuts in his bishop and queen, so it reduces his field of vision in the fog of war. So after c4, I played the move bishop f5. Because, I didn't know whether he had a piece covering, covering the e4 square. Although, now I think I would probably play the move e4, because even if he had a piece taking on e4, it would open up the position to his king, and, I could... The only thing is I wouldn't know if he took whether he'd have a queen or a knight, so... if he knew I was taking a knight, then I could probably go rook e8 and, just have the nice pin as such. But otherwise, if there's a queen, then it means that the ways of trying to attack it with, the bishop or the rook would just not make any sense. Say bishop f5 he could take, rook e8 he could take. So in a sense, I think bishop f5 is the better move, because the odds of him having a knight on h4 are very unlikely, and likewise having a bishop on d3. I was willing to make that gamble. And in the end, I was rewarded, because I find that often these squares like c5 and f5 are very good spots for the bishop, because I know that very, very few players actually play moves like bishop d3 and bishop e3 in their games, which is kind of surprising, because it's often very good squares for the bishop, because I mean, say if you have bishop on d3, it sort of points almost toward the black king. If they castle, you can then play bishop h7, or if they play h6, you can figure then they're probably going to castle short. So it gives you useful information to have the bishop on d3. But fortunately for me, he blundered, and instead of playing queen a4, where the queen is most likely to be protected, because he knows I don't have a pawn on b5 there, or even a move like queen e1, which is passive, but at least keeps the queen safe for certain. Instead he played queen c2, and after this now I am just winning. So he played bishop e3, and well, I mean, it makes sense to take because it gives me extra information. Now I know that his, he doesn't have a rook on c1 or a king on g1. So I can figure from this that his king is almost certainly in the center. And therefore it's very logical to play e4, knowing that, well, he probably has an knight on f3 because that's a normal development. And it can maybe help open up the position and give me more information. After knight e4, I think nowadays I would probably play the move rook f e8. Because I would say, well, okay, if he moves the knight away, it means that I'm going to, have this option to see what piece is on the e file. In this case, it would be the king. So, but I'd say I played bishop e4, which, I thought he would take with a rook, but then I realized after king takes, well, okay, it's probably a king out there as such, just based on the fact that some of his earlier moves were a little bit weird. Like he had moved the c pawn earlier, for example, is something I knew already. So I played rook f e8, and he already has to move to the f file. But king f4 does take a few guts to play this move, and immediately actually white would still be up a piece in this position. Though I think the fact to have the rooks on the open files would give me more than enough compensation. And since you don't really know exactly where white's pieces are, a good practical move would be to play either a move like h6, making sure that the king is safe, or pushing the rook's pawn with a move like f5 and just making a5. And just sort of just grabbing space and giving information of, say, whether he's pushed the a pawn. Or if he does go b4, it means I can take the pawn for free. I find it very often this variant pushing the rook's pawn is a good idea if you don't have a better plan. Because it's a way to see what the opponent is doing without declaring your intentions. And it can also misinform the opponent potentially. Because they might think, oh, he's pushed to h5, so his king is cast on the other flank. So it can be a bit misleading for him if they even see that you played it. But yeah, in the game, he didn't realize I had a rook on d8, and the result was that I simply won in this way. And I think also seeing here is that the games are relatively short. That, with this variant, I find that, at least when you're playing against not so experienced players, say below 1700 perhaps, what I find is the games will generally be decided relatively early. So it means that, if you get your piece on more active squares, that will often be a decisive advantage, unless the opponent is very good at defending all of their squares and covering everything perfectly. So the piece mobility is important, but I would say that, in principle, anticipating the opponent's possible threats and being able to stop all of their ways to attack your pieces in a good way is probably even more important in general. Okay, let's look at one more example. And okay, since we looked at these last 3 games, I want to actually show you the most recent game that I played in this Fog of War variant. And this will be a nice way to sort of show how my play has evolved since, since these first games I played. Now, this is a game where I knew that if I won this game, it would make me, for certain, the strongest player in 4-play chess on the ratings. Okay, if I don't know it for certain, but I'd looked up the games of different top players, seeing who else they had played, if they'd come across any other top players. And that's why I figured that I would almost certainly be the top player if I won this game. So anyway, I didn't really know what opening my opponent would play. I hadn't played this Severed Circle player before. But I figured if he's rated 1600, then it's more likely he will play a flank opening. And that made me a little more courageous, where I find that this approach of playing it kind of like an English reti, or let's say a Sicilian dragon, with knight f6 and then c5 is quite effective. Because even if they have a pawn on d4 and they take, you'll generally be able to get that pawn back very quickly with, say, queen a5 and take c5. And then they won't even know that you have the queen on a5 for certain, so it'll kind of scare them a little bit, and it'll give you a lot more information. So it's kind of a win-win either way, whether they have a pawn on d4 or not. And even if, say, they had the worst case scenario, like, say, for example, if they'd had a pawn on b4. I mean, if they take here, like, you can see they don't have a pawn on d4. So, I mean, even here you could still, let's say, for example, still have a reasonable position, like, maybe go b6 and, play for the fact that you sack a pawn, but you get the open lines for the queen, and, well, that gives you the extra information. It gives you good compensation for the pawn. But instead, he played b3 as we saw. And I mean, also I noticed a lot of players around this level, like 1600 to 1750-ish, will tend to play quite passive openings as white. So it means if you play someone ambitiously, like, say, if you play knight c6 and, go for d5, then you can often be rewarded for this sort of aggressive play. If h5, I mean, you could even either let them take or, play bishop f5. And these kind of aggressive blackburn subs tend to work very well. Assuming, of course, your opponent hasn't put the bishop on d3. But it's a very rare player who will play bishop d3 and block the d2 pawn. Though admittedly, someone might watch this video and say, okay, someone watched Max's video and have seen a Max often puts bishop on f5 and try to anticipate it. So I only really do it if I'm pretty sure my opponent hasn't put the bishop there. Anyway, I played g6. This is a very solid setup. Because, I mean, by having the bishop on the long diagonal, it does give a lot of mobility for when I eventually move the knight. And I sort of can choose when to do it. And it means that after his h5 move, I could now play knight h5. And granted, it does sort of mean, I'm assuming he hasn't got the bishop on e2. Because, I mean, say if he played bishop e2 here, and then gone h5, I mean, in this case, I mean, I wouldn't know that his bishop is on b2. Like, if he had an knight on c3, it would really weaken my king and, give me a serious disadvantage, potentially. Though not a losing disadvantage, perhaps, if I am very careful. But still, it would be a little bit unpleasant. So, instead, I went h5, and basically I was able to win a pawn because of the fact that he has this weak bishop, an undefended bishop. So, obviously, if rook h5, I would go bishop b2 here. So, he takes, and again, I figured, well, he knows almost certainly that I took back with a knight. I mean, he knows for certain because my knight moved away from h5, and you can see the open h file. So, that does give white some compensation based on his greater mobility. But on the other hand, he also, well, he knows my rook is on h8, so he might think, well, I'm probably going to castle. So I thought, well, let's play to move king to f8 in this case. Because by playing king f8, I sort of make it that it's very unlikely that he'll think my king is on f8. He might think my king's on g8, but it'll sort of basically mislead him. And you can see also he plays queen b2, so kind of again, because he's attacking the square he knows my piece is, it means it's a good idea to defend it prophylactically. So that if the opponent does take, you'll basically be able to win material. I mean, I already know that he has traded off the this dark squared bishop. And I also know at this point that he can't really put his knight on any square that will, that will target the g7 knight here. Because of the fact that, well, I've covered all these squares already, so I'll have fair warning. I played the move knight c6 because I thought, well, maybe there's a chance his queen is on h4. And I don't want to blunder with e5, queen d8. So again, just making sure all my pieces are protected to guard against any tactics. Okay, it's true the rook on h8 is unprotected, but he has no way to defend it. No way to attack it without me knowing. If rook h7, I will see that coming. Now, he played the move knight g5, and this was actually a very critical decision because at first I thought, oh, he's trying to, trick me. He has a queen on g3 hiding, and, therefore he, he is trying to fool me like this, figuring my queen is probably on d8. But then I realized I was probably overthinking it because I thought, okay, it's very unlikely he has a knight on or queen on g3. Because he would have had to have played in the next, let's say, 4 moves. I don't know what exactly he played. He would have had to have played queen f3, queen g3, and then knight f3, knight g5 is pretty much the exact moves. And the odds of that are extremely low. And I would know if he had played f4 because just put my pawn there to cover it. So you can see how my play is both aggressive and prophylactic at the same time. So I could be 99% sure that this was just a free piece. And when he sort of paused and didn't take my queen, I knew that this was technically winning. Because I am up a piece and a pawn. And with g3, it already tells me that, his bishop has probably moved away from f1. So I thought, okay, let's play bishop g4 and have the extra mobility. Because the odds of his pawn being on f3 were very low. And bishop g4 turned out to be very prophetic. Because he played bishop e2. And after takes and takes, I was seriously tempted to play queen g4 and figure out whether he took with a knight or a king. But I figured, well, it doesn't actually matter that much which way he took back. So let's just slowly improve the position, saying, well, I'm technically winning anyway, so I can slowly improve the piece placement and just make it that, well, he has no real hopes of counterplay. Because, I mean, if you look at this, like, again, the only piece of mine that is not defended is the rook on h8. So he played a4, I think, turned if b5 he could take, but I figured, well, okay, he doesn't have a pawn on e4, and therefore if he has a pawn on c4, it's very unlikely that, he has a knight on c3 as well, is what I figured. So I'd said, well, let's play d5 and kind of take the chance. Because, I mean, if he did take a pawn knight, I would be able to see that, and that would give me extra information to compensate for losing the pawn, I guess. Anyway, he played c4, and I think most people would take without thinking to activate the rook. But it also occurred to me that if I push ahead, that it kind of gums up the position. And, in a closed position, it gives me more time to basically figure out where his pieces are placed so that I can then come up with a winning plan. So he played a5, and, I mean, I figured since his pawn on e3 that knight f5 would be quite tempting. But I thought, let's just play a6 and simply fix his pawn in place as a weakness. Granted, he would know that I would have a pawn there, so it's maybe not absolutely the most precise. Like, if it was equal material, I think a6 would be a mistake, but here I think it's a good move. Though, I mean, I could have figured out that because he has a pawn c4, pawn a5, that my knight would have an outpost on b4, and that would have been a more precise continuation. But okay, a6 is a safe move, and since I'm winning, that's not a bad idea. So after knight c2, I played d3, so that I would have extra mobility for my pieces. And also that way I'd be able to see if he took with d3, and I'd get an open file for the rook. So here I at least knew that his pawn on d2 was on d2, and therefore could figure that probably his development is not that great, because of the fact I played bishop b2 before. So I said, okay, let's play knight e6 and just build up very slowly. I just played very patiently. I knew I could safely play king g7, because I'm covering knight f5, knight e6, and knight h5. Probably White's best chance is to castle long, or maybe even play king d1 and try to play g4 and open up the position to the king. Because he probably figures that I most likely have the king castle king side, even though he doesn't know for sure yet which way my king is castled. Instead, he blundered with b4, and I guess he just didn't realize I had a pawn on c5. And after takes, queen takes and knight takes, he just resigned at this point. I mean, it's why I'm up so much in material that I could even just pile everything up against the d2 pawn, like rook d7, rook d8, knight d3, e4. I can play these kind of moves and pretty much figure out where his pieces are and win from there. So yeah, you can see how I play in this variant that it really is the key is all about prophylaxis. It's all about seeing what ideas your opponent could play to possibly attack your position, and then making sure that your pieces are defended and ready to deal with it as such. So that any way they can attack, you'll see it coming in advance. And also at the same time finding ways to, well, kind of minimize the odds that they will, sort of know where your pieces are. Kind of keeping your position as flexible as possible so that you can easily adapt to any surprises. And also place your piece away that is, not exactly the way, let's say, it is the most classical, but not completely sort of unorthodox either. Where you still put your piece on good squares, but in a way where it's hard for him to figure out where it is. Or where it minimizes the chance you accidentally put your piece on pre. So you sort of will generally be reluctant to put your piece on an advanced square unless you either are up material and just want to trade down, or if you're 99% sure they can't take the piece safely in some way, or if they do, it's going to be most likely an equal exchange. So that's sort of the idea. You kind of play the odds as well as to how likely it is that there will be problems with the move. Anyway, I hope you found this Fog of War video interesting and that it'll help you to play better Fog of War chess. As always, in Fog of War, you can look up my games under my username Illingworth on chess.com to see more of them. And yeah, if people like this series and want more, then it can be a longer series as well for sure. So that said, good luck in your next Fog of War games, and I'll see you in the next video.